Hello and welcome to part 6 of the Battles Dogger Bank. Me responding to questions in the comments, and I'm starting off with the ones on live. So we have Agent J. The Russo-Japanese War allowed Sweden to move its entire fleet to West Coast during the Union crisis with Norway in 1905. If the dissolution of the Union had resulted in war, the Norwegians would have been mocked for their terrible timing. Quite true. Context happens in context. Cooking on the cheap. I shouldn't laugh at the what I want to melee, but I did. I'm glad you laughed. And really miss watching you live, Doctor, but my insomnia is getting better, and you normally go live around 5 a.m. here. Well, I'm glad your insomnia is getting better. An interesting video. And for the record, I completely agree with your idea about gyms. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Love the channel, and between Drac, armored carriers, and yourself, many of my questions get answered before I even ask them. Thank you for educating me in a meaningful way. Thank you. Glad to know it's being helpful. Gerald, I have this mental image now of the Russian squadron missing every single fish in the water. It happens. Dylan Allaire, guess I'm going to have to suffer through 3 hours of this tomorrow. Oh, the travesty. I'm sorry. Bersham. Now, an interesting history scenario would be if the British would have fought the Russian Central Pacific Squadron and won, how would that impact development of the Japanese Kantai-Kasen doctrine and war plans and operations in World War II? Well, before I get into Glenn McKinley's answer, I do agree with him that the Japanese would look at the British activity. It really is kind of interesting that it would be a small force of elite ships because the British wouldn't need the full fleet, but they would probably take the full fleet. What's more interesting is that it might well be seen more as a peer-on-peer engagement. I think the interesting thing is that I'm fairly certain if the British beat up the Russians, it will be less shocking to the world than the Japanese beating up the Russians. It's just going to be the way. It shouldn't be, but it will be. Then we have Glenn McCullough's response to that. In speculation, the Japanese would look at the British activity and decide that a small force of elite ships can readily defeat an unprepared opponent. I have visions of a Japanese Yamato sailing into Pearl Harbor to take on the entire American fleet. I only discovered the Americans had big guns and lots of them, but no air cover, and useless torpedoes. Yes, so potentially actually Yamato does win that one because the American ones, let's be honest, the battleships in Pearl Harbor couldn't fire because they might hit each other. So yeah, whereas Yamato couldn't not fire for hitting a target. It'd be an interesting scenario. It would definitely be an interesting one. Carl goes, Recon Catcher firing 300 rounds and not doing anything. Honestly, with those 47mm guns, otherwise known as the 3-pounder, with a decent 10% hit rate, would not sink the Camel Catcher itself with 30 actual hits. Possibly. Agent 8, read about the American Civil War if you want to know about how over-promoted officers. When both sides have found competent higher officers, the war is basically over. I would agree with that on the American Civil War. By the time the Confederates get competent officers, they no longer have any logistics, and by the time the Union gets competent officers, they now have well-trained armed forces to lead, which are no longer like the militia armies that the original ones were trying to lead. And there were some competent officers in the first few years. Roskins comes to mind. Sorry, ran out of fizzy caffeine and fell asleep before the end. You're bad. I'm sorry. You shouldn't need it. That guy named Dan. I mean, I would totally be inspired to a greater degree in HMS Wasp than something like G14, given small ships, quite aggressive names is like for what you're supposed to do to inspire morale and performance. Better than the USS Hellcat than the USS insert politician name. Glenn McGilly, what to do with BT? Honestly, he should be placed on the flagship HMS Falklands, and he can stay down there and prepare for boarding parties. Thank you, Martin Howell. And then Cumberland Sausage, right? Not on board with the no small big government thing. Having the right government for the scenario you're in sounds like an unprincipled invitation for authoritarians to justify just about anything they do. In nicest way, authoritarians don't tend to need justification to do whatever they want to do. They tend to just have it. And small government, big government is usually something you've thrown at democratic governments, not authoritarians, because if you shout, I want a small government and an authoritarian, I'm sorry, Cumberland Sausage, I do understand the point you're making, but when you're making that stance, there are so many jokes I could make. I'm not going to. Small governments with limited power are just better for people in general because they allow people to get on with their lives their own way. Their one job is to maintain the fenced realm and guarantee the rights of citizens. All else after that is an option for negotiation. Love the recent stream on the role they are in 1980s thing. No, I'm glad you played that. And as I've said in some of the long patrols on the street on the 1980s, that isn't really an option. If you want strong defense, right, then you're going to need an educated people because you're going to need to be researching good weapons and you're going to need to man those weapons. So you need an education department. You're going to have factories producing weapons. They're going to need to get the ports and various components, which means you're going to need infrastructure. It isn't really up for negotiation. It's if you want defense, you have to have a whole lot of other things with it. And if you don't have defense and you have all those other things, then they're going to be in trouble because someone else is going to go, oh, that's a nice lot of infrastructure. I'd like that. I will take it. So basically, it's symbiotic. You need. There are many arguments I get into over the small government concept. I do not like huge government because, as I agree with you on the thing that once you have got a large enough government, people tend to generate work to fit themselves. But having a massive government isn't necessarily the result of not having a small government. You can have a right-sized government. You just have to work out what the right size it is for you, and preferably frame it in such a way that it cannot be, then it can be there when you need it. All right, let's get on to the video, to the ones which were the uploads rather than the live. So, and we are going down to part 1 of the Battles of Dogger Bank. Comments. I still haven't updated the links on this one. I'm sorry about that. TAC Covert 4. At a certain point, they will escape to escalate to rock, paper, exocet. We hope not. Born in Chicago. I'm more a fan of the 7619 BCE Battle of Dogger Bank, the clash in the morass, otherwise known as the Brawl in Slough, in the Slough. Admittedly, it's a poorly documented battle. I've honestly never heard of it. Silly Manico. Since Bembo arrived in the middle of the night, how close did they approach before the French realized and was an opportunity lost? I'm imagining a rather confused situation. Well, Bill Bolton actually answered the question for me in a way, and says late June in Dogger Bank, Dog area, surprisingly light, even at 2200 hours, technically twilight. It is quite light late at night, so I think it was about 9:30, and they saw them at a significant distance. Thank you, Doug M, for saying good stuff. Right. And part 2, the 1781 battle. Kai Anderson, great work as always. Thank you. Thank you. Paul from Chicago. Did he just loop frigates, sloops, and brigs into the same category? No one tell Kate Jameson. Seriously, we don't want anything happen to Dr. Clark. Don't worry, I told Kate Jameson myself. To be fair, depending upon the time and specific type, they could all fit in a 6th rate category. A large brig or a sloop or a small frigate. Sadly enough, yes, they can. That's from me. And Paul from Chicago. We have a saying in the Midwest, the first thing to do when you're in a hole is throw away the shovel. Again, Kate is wonderful, and I have told her these things. And I'm still alive, mainly because I can run fast. Paul from Chicago. So basically, BT's captains lack the initiative of Nelson or Onslow. Not hard to see why after all that Victorian nonsense. That is the point. The captains in the First World War are a product of their period, just as the captains in World War II are a product of their period, and the captains in World War II in Napoleonic Wars are a product of their period. They've had experiences. Right, we're up to 1904. Of course, the more incident than battle. The Kingsbrook. There is incompetence. There is the Russian 2nd Pacific Squadron, and then there is the Kamchatka. Yeah. Attack Covert 4. In the aftermath, Admiral Beresford made a battle plan around only using part of the Channel Fleet because he felt that a one-on-one fight against the 2nd Pacific Squadron would be dishonorable and overkill. As I've said myself before, seems to be a competition between Beresford and Fisher in terms of pronouncing how few ships they would need to go and take out the Russians. It seems to be getting progressively smaller and smaller. In the nicest way, Beresford is not as much of an idiot as sometimes his own press makes out. So, yes, he would have taken the full fleet. Roderick Campbell, great episode. Thanks very much. Thank you. Rick Vasava, would the Japanese have found out about this sad comedy that was Russian fleet? Yes, they did. As I answered. And Rick Vasava, the clock. Would it be safe to say that they would have known all about the force, quality of ships, and cruise X in the Russian fleet? And if so, what would they have thought? Well, they would have known about everything because it was published in the newspapers. It's general knowledge to everyone. And yeah, I can't say what effect that had on their planning, but they seem to have planned rather well for it. That's the Crow. Admiral Savetsky is one of the admirals in history who I want to go back in time and buy a beer for. Talk about getting told to do the impossible without the tools or the personnel to even have a chance. I suspect that only social rank prevented him punching most of his senior officers after that mess up. There is a reason he keeps chucking his binoculars in the water. Was the extremely poor gunnery on the part of the 2nd Pacific Squadron down to the lack of training or poor equipment? I'm curious to know how Tsushima would have worked if the Russians had rolled up with well-trained crews and ships in good order. Well, it could have been interesting, Tsushima, if they'd rolled up with well-trained crews and ships which hadn't just sailed around the world. They were quite good ships, but they just sailed around the world, which has a deleterious effect on it. Basically, they needed permission from the British to stop in, I don't know, some of the big ports Britain owned in Far East and actually do some repairs. Did the Russians resupply in harbour or only at sea? In harbours, largely. For example, at Tangiers, as I put it myself. But they did manage to wreck the undersea cables then. I don't know. It's fun times. So we've done 1904, so it's now 1915. Oh, BT, you BT. John Arnold, if the commanders got the fleets they deserved, BT would have been skipper of one of the smaller fishing boats. All from Chicago, the 13.5-inch guns were a product of the battleship contemporaries. The small tube boilers, though, they probably should have had those. Honestly, I don't rate Watts as highly as Danicourt or White. Too many gross errors and lacking innovation. Yes, I know he built Dreadnought, and I'm still stand by the same. Yes, I agree. To be fair, there wasn't really the partnership between him and Fisher as there was between Henderson and Goodall in the 1930s, and that possibly is reflected in some of the ships which are built. Bill Bolton, that weird-looking capital B in the letter in German is Esat. Think of it as a double S. Yes, it's very easy to read it as a B if you're reading English. Yes. Felix B. A wolf von Eichhorn could be translated as wolf of squirrel. That's cruel. But still sounds cool. And Tatco at 4, but the squirrel could be a distant cousin of a certain bunny, and there aren't as many holy hand grenades. I'm not sure. I'm presuming the Easter Bunny? Carl Gasbert, I just wonder, what would have happened if BT had German coal? Wipeout time. Layer 8, sister breaks something. Brother has to fix it. Welcome to the club, brother. Yeah, that's my life. Kingsrook, NCC 1701 doesn't count for me, as that registry has entered the public consciousness and so agree. The broad point sounds like. Okay, thank you. Adrian J. I read Castle Steel to get an overview of World War I naval war. I really like that book. Do you think so as well? Yes, that's written. It's a good book, although it's very weak when it comes to certain the activities of the Dover Patrol Act. It's very good at fleets and battles. Inquisitor Jackknife. Yes, BT and the 2nd Pacific Squadron deserve each other. No, the 2nd Pacific Squadron does not deserve BT. Larry, sorry, I saw the expression on your face when discussing the sister factor, and obviously howled laughter. I have a sister, she's just as bad. Zero complaints about taking advantage of her brother's protective streak. My sister doesn't take advantage of brother's protective streak, she just blatantly plays on it. Guido, hello, Guido. Somehow I get the feeling BT is not the RN's most popular. I do understand he had quite liberal private inclinations. I think he was more interested in horses myself. Adrian J. Hippos is like a teen girl in the 90s texting her friends before clubbing. That's being cruel. Teen girls do exactly have a moderation of it. George Crab, does that make Shear his BFF? Did they have those matching heart lockets? Possibly. John819, the best thing that could have happened for the British would have been an early German hit taking out BT's signal officer Seymour. Since that didn't happen, Seymour should at the very least have been awarded an Iron Cross by the Kaiser. The point I'm going to make is the same as point as I wrote back to him. Is Seymour is chosen by BT, who knows his qualifications and experience, and the flags are hoisted right next to the flag deck, where BT is. So he should have noticed and corrected. Blaming Seymour is what BT did, and the young officer committed suicide over it. It's not really on him, it's on BT. The buck stops with the Admiral. I'm sorry. It does. Nicole Ross. Hello, Nicole. What gauge is the model railway? In a battle where you greatly outnumber, gauge is the model railway road. It's going to be N gauge. In a battle where you greatly outnumber your foe, shouldn't you keep roughly a third of destroyers in reserve to sink the slowed, but not sinking enemy ships with torpedoes? Destroyers have the speed to run them down, or if disaster occurs, launch torpedoes and smokescreen to cover retreat. You can do that. It's an option, but honestly, with the way BT was handling things, chuck them all in. He didn't seem to understand the concept of reserve. Adrian J. If a squadron commander changes his mind and wants a flag captain, how does he get one? I'm presuming this is about twits and force, and well, as I said, first they have to see if their boss has one. If they don't, it ain't happening. So twit didn't have one, no one else is getting one. But if they do, then they make the case. If they're a captain, they may just get an extra commander or lieutenant commander to take over some of the ship management duties. But if a commodore, they could get a flag captain. Yeah. Financial intelligence. The problem with battle cruisers is those big guns and fast speed make everyone who's already aggressive about your armor. Yes, it's aggression. A good name does make a lot of difference, as well as a proper presentation for the situation. See following tweet. Had a good laugh at the radios. Heard similar stories from my great grandpapa. I think the RN could have fit 2 additional turrets if they moved the engines and increased the funnel size whilst cutting down 1. Otherwise, very good summary thus far. Another great video. Thank you. Keep up the good work and hope the officers are going well. Best wishes to you and your whole family as always. P.S. My 8th grade homeroom teacher would rather have agreed with you about the 1915 battle. Story for another time. Cool. Tag 4, Covert 4, the British Admiral should have been there, who should have been there would be sturdy, but too many people were scared of him his independence streak. As I point out, the independence streak, or his utter lack of ability to think strategically, as witnessed by the fact that his decisions led to the penny packet debacle, which caused Conrad damage. He's a good fighter, he's not a good strategician, so really he shouldn't be that senior animal. He wins the Falklands, but honestly, you can't lose at the Falklands. And then Thomas Rotter. BBC didn't come into existence until 1922. The first domestic national broadcast of non-military maritime nature in the UK appeared to have taken place in 1920. And now, as I explained, I said family history, I think, from 3 generations around. I do know I'm not the first generation to enjoy building, tinkering with electronic things, so maybe that's its source. That is its source. I had a conversation, and basically the person who it was a retired Royal Navy engineer who was really passionate about electrics, managed to blow up a barn once or twice, and had all sorts of things in his in his barn outside his house. He ends up at some point going and consulting, not officially recalled the duty, but consulting in the Royal Navy radio establishments later on in the war, and is considered very good with the equipment he's building. So that's who's picking up. During World War II, the same gentleman, very, very much older, was also called up to help again, but again, not called up in uniform. He was good at those things. And last one, the 1916 battle. Seth Thompson, another good one, Doctor. I may suffer from your von Hippel syndrome now and then while playing World of Warships, so you can see what happens. No excess, just my 2 cents. Don't worry. Bart Foster, was it normal to send out minesweepers without any heavy air escort, as it was too risky to send heavier ships near the minefield? Yes. You've answered your own question, Bart. You've got it right. Given that cruiser was lost to mine in follow-up operations, that is a real threat. It was. Ben Wilson, a little cheat. The MV Sparebank of the Bank Line was built in 1926 by Howland Wolff, Governor Glasgow. In January 1941, captured by the German raider Atlantis and sent to France. Renamed Dogger Bank, she was commissioned as a raider ship of 53 and sent to lay mines to South America, then to Japan. In Japan, she picked up the cruiser Raider 4 and supply tanker Ullmark, both of which had been caught fire and blew up at Yokohama. Dogger Bank, with the two German crews aboard, was torpedoed by the U-43 in the South Atlantic. This led to loss of the ship and all but one man of the crew's 109 men. There also speaks volumes about the ferocity of HMS Erebus' crew, not to mention their gunnery. No losses does not mean they didn't take a fair bit of damage, which might just explain the cruise a bit. Yeah, Calvin Gasbert. Could it be that the sloops escaped via the route they had created in the minefield and Germans would not like chase them into the minefield? They anchored like 2 days ago. The sloops were caught on the edge of the minefield and hadn't really cleared much by this point. They'd still been surveying for the most part, so not really how they escaped. More a repeat of 1915, where they went after the Erebus rather than the Blucher. And Paul from Chicago, that's an attractive destroyer. Edit. North Sea lighting is notorious. I can easily see how someone would mistake that for a cruiser. Edit. Much anger, probably from being sore. Now the Battle of Dogger Bank, the action of 10th February 1916. Paul Erebus doesn't even earn a battle honor for her spirited attack. I don't think you said the time of day the battle was, and I'm not able to find it. It was late in the evening. And no, it was in the middle of the day, and it was late evening by the time they got away. One gets the idea that the Admiralty was so amused with itself that when the Germans attacked the sloops that they chose not to issue a battle honor. Captain Halwell Carew only picked up a DSO when a VC was probably more appropriate. Yeah, it's terrible, that battle, in terms of the awards. They really did deserve more. And seems a nice place to end. We're on Erebus. Anyway, thank you very much. I hope you like these videos, and I will try and do these comment videos usually a week afterwards or so that they get a decent amount of comments and for me to respond to, and I can answer your questions. Anyway, thank you very much. Take care, and have a nice evening.